Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding, here to discuss what to do if you live overseas and you miss the June 15 tax deadline. So, taxpayers have different due dates depending on where they reside and whether they've applied for an extension or not. So in the United States, taxes for individuals, when we're talking about individual tax form 1040, not corporate forms and foreign trust forms that have different due dates, right? You're a U.S. person, you got to file your tax return, you live in the U.S., it's due April 15th unless it falls on a weekend, then it's normally pushed forward a day or two. For example, the government may extend the time to file, like in 2020, it was extended to May 17th, 2021 to file your 2020 tax returns. When you live overseas, you live abroad, you generally get until June 15th to file your tax returns, not necessarily to pay the return, to pay the amount of tax due, but that's the due date to file. Now, whether you live in the U.S. or you live abroad, you generally can apply for an extension. It's automatic until October. If you live overseas, you may also qualify for an additional extension to December, depending on the specific facts and circumstances. That one's not automatic or guaranteed like the October 15th extension, which is essentially guaranteed. When someone misses the due date, there are various issues. But before we get there, let's talk about other requirements beyond just the tax return, right? If you live overseas, chances are you're also going to have some international information reporting. Some of the more common ones are the FBAR, Foreign Bank and Financial Account reporting. That's done on a FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network Form 114. Don't get thrown off by the name and avoid, or try to avoid at least the ridiculous fear-mongering online. Almost or nearly always it's not a criminal situation. The FBAR is normally due on the date the tax return is due, but it's currently on automatic extension, so a person has until October. So if you miss the June 15 tax deadline, doesn't mean you missed the FBAR reporting date. The Form 8938 is actually filed with your tax return, and it goes to the IRS. It goes on automatic extension, or it's due when your tax return is due. So presumably if you have your tax return due June 15th because you live overseas, that's when your Form 8938 is going to be due as well. There are various other forms to consider. There's Form 5471, Form 3520, Form 3520A. 5471 is for foreign corporations, 3520, gifts and trust distributions, 3520A is for trust. 3520A can have a different due date, and depending, it's generally going to be March, not April. So depending on where you're at, you have to factor all that in to decide when something is due. Just because you reside overseas and your tax return is due June doesn't mean all the international reporting associated with it is going to be on extension as well. Some of them will automatically push forward until June, but not all of them. So that's definitely something to consider. Something else to consider is that if you're filing an extension, it's Form 4868 for your tax return, but other forms such as 3520-A does require you to file a Form 7004. It's a different extension form. So what happens if you missed the June 15 tax deadline? Well, there's plenty of programs you could do depending on the facts and circumstances, right? The IRS has developed what's called offshore tax amnesty programs. There's Streamlined domestic, Streamlined foreign, reasonable cause, delinquency procedures, voluntary disclosure program. Now, if you reside overseas, the best program, if you're non-willful, which most taxpayers generally are, is going to be the Streamlined Foreign Offshore Procedures. Under that program, taxpayer has all penalties waived. So, you have some late filing that, or, failure to file, failure to pay penalties that can normally kick in. Typically, those will be waived as well. But it's the international reporting penalties such as FBAR, FATCA, Form 5471, all that jazz. Those are generally all avoided by entering the Streamlined Foreign Offshore Procedures, but they have very strict residence rules, something you should look into before just filing that form. Some people are like, well, I just, June 15th might have been, I missed that deadline. This might have been the first year. You might have had some prior year non-compliance as well. Should I just file forward? Should I mass file going back? You got to be careful. If you do what's called a quiet disclosure, you may become subject to excessive fines and penalties. And if you are non-willful, by doing a quiet disclosure intentionally, you may bump yourself into a willful category when it's not necessary. We have lots of information available on our main website, goldinglawyers.com. We have, you can always reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if you think it's appropriate. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.